I love the outdoors, and I go on lots of hikes and camping trips. I have all kinds of mostly great memories from my travels, but there was one time that I found myself in a pretty scary situation. Now, this was many years ago when I was much younger. I was on a solo trip and found myself hiking on some really great trails out in the wilderness. One particular afternoon, I went on this really long hike. It wasn't that difficult, and it was just that the trails were super long and went in many different directions. The park was large, and in the area I was, there was nobody else that day out at all. With me being young, I had poor planning, and I had already hiked elsewhere earlier in the day. I wanted to hike this park as well, as I would be moving out of the town the following morning, so I started a lot later than I should have. I got way out there on the trail, probably over an hour's hike from where my car was. Then I realized that the sun was setting. Out here there were no lights at all. I had just a small headlight that I got lucky with because it happened to still be in my pocket from another hike. So when the sun started setting and things began to get dark, I realized that I needed to be getting back. I turned around and started going towards my car again. But even with walking fast, it was probably going to take like 45 minutes. I knew that it would be pitch dark before I got there, and in the entire time that I had been in that park, I had not seen anybody at all. So I hiked on this trail, and it was pretty narrow. The terrain was relatively flat, a few hills here and there, but it was nothing difficult. The tough part was the dense woods on both sides of the path. In some areas, it really hung over the trail, and it felt like you were out there far in the wilderness. So this obviously made it harder to see in the dark, and obviously it could be easier to get lost as well. As I was moving back, it got darker and darker outside. Pretty soon, it was completely dark out. I was amazed at just how little light there was out there. The sky provided a little bit of light, but not much, as it was not a full moon or even close to it. I used my headlight, which helped, and without it, I'm not sure what I would have done. When I was still about 30 minutes from making it back, I walked around this curving part of the trail. I made it around the corner to a long straightaway, but with thick woods on both sides. When I did, I saw there was a man standing right in the middle of the path directly up ahead. He was not facing me, but the other direction, and he was standing completely stationary. I slowed down, and it just gave me a bad feeling. I thought that probably it was just the fact that I was out here alone in the wilderness at night and I hadn't seen anybody all day. Anything else would seem creepy. But the guy was just standing there, and it didn't seem like he was doing anything. He had no hiking gear on, and it was just strange, because why would he be out here on the trail this late? I hadn't seen anybody else the entire time. I still walked towards him, but slowed down significantly. He was really blocking my way. Then he slowly turned around and faced me. I was prepared to say something like a friendly greeting, but as soon as he turned around, he had the creepiest grin on his face that I've ever seen. It was like a sinister smile, and his eyes were really wide. It was disturbing to see, and I did not say anything at all. He just stood there staring at me like that for a moment. The guy appeared to be in his 40s or 50s, had a baseball cap on, and was just wearing a black sweatshirt and jeans. The look on his face told me to get out of there. Without even really thinking about it, I just turned around and started walking back. I began going back around the bend, and when I did, I heard the man start walking in my direction. That was the last thing that I wanted to hear. I walked faster and looked back, but could not see him, indicating that I was still a good distance ahead. So I kept going, walking about as quickly as I could without jogging. I walked the next minute or two back to a spot on the trail where there was another path. It was an opportunity to go right or left. I had gone right before because I knew that was the way back. But now I was going left, and I just prayed that I would somehow connect back to where I needed to go. When I got to that trail, I heard the guy in the distance. I was too scared to keep walking, so I started to run. I went on a fast jogging speed. Being an avid hiker and also running a fair amount, I was comfortable with jogging, and I could make pretty good time. I continued, and now could not hear if the guy was following me or not, because my jogging was making too much noise. I jogged for like 10 minutes straight, and then slowed down. When I did, I didn't hear the guy, so I hoped that I was in the clear. But I was still super paranoid about seeing or hearing him. It was seemingly just him and I out there alone in the woods. I kept walking, and soon found another path that went to the right, and took it. I walked along this for a really good distance. Then, I went back to jogging again. I didn't hear the guy, and I just wanted to get out of there fast. After slowing down and walking again, I took a turn in another direction that I thought was correct. I walked down that trail for maybe another 10 minutes. Then, finally, I saw that I was back. I had reached the parking lot just where my car was, all by itself. I left and got out of there. I'm not sure where the man came from or what he was doing out there, but seeing him look at me with that creepy smile was a really scary moment, and I'm glad that I got out of there. This is something that happened a few years ago. Sometimes I have to move around for my job. At this time in particular, I was working in a new city and got a smaller house to rent there. I would be living by myself, and the neighborhood was fairly busy with many other houses. They all had pretty small yards, but it was a decent place to live. It was close to the city and didn't seem dangerous or anything. I was enjoying it for the first couple of months. Then, one night, I arrived home from work pretty late. It was about 10 or 11 p.m., as sometimes I have to work later or longer shifts. When I arrived home, everything was normal and fine. The neighborhood was quiet and it seemed calm. So I drove into the driveway, parked my car, got out, and went inside. I was inside the house for no longer than a minute when there was a knock at my front door. Now this was really strange, obviously, because of how late it was at night. Plus, I had just gotten back home. So I walked over to the door and looked to see who was there. But I went to a window and looked out of that instead of just opening the door to see who was there. When I did, I saw a man who I did not recognize just standing there. He was wearing a hooded jacket, and I was pretty sure that he wasn't one of my neighbors. But even still, why knock on someone's door at this hour? I wasn't going to answer it. I moved away from the window and walked deeper into the house, hoping that he would just walk away and leave. The guy knocked again, though. I still did nothing. But then he knocked again for a third time. I hoped by now that he would think that nobody was home, or get the hint that nobody was going to answer. But with the fact that I had just recently arrived home, I wondered if he had seen me. Was this just a coincidence, or had he followed me, or had he been watching my house or something? Did he see me go inside? I didn't know why, but that's just a thought that came into my head for some reason. But I wasn't answering the door. Surprisingly, the guy just kept knocking. And he didn't knock any louder or faster. He just knocked the exact same way, over and over again. He would knock, wait like 30 seconds to a minute, and then knock again. After a long time of it, I was still in the other room, and I didn't know what to do. I could try to tell him to go away, but I didn't know if he was dangerous or something. Possibly there was an explanation and nothing was wrong. It seemed like the longer I didn't answer, though, the more I could not, and the more it creeped me out, too. It wasn't like he was desperate for me to answer the door. It was more like he was just going to keep knocking for the longest time. After he was still knocking for like 15 minutes straight, I was completely creeped out. I even considered calling the cops, but I didn't think there was anything illegal about knocking on someone's door. Looking back now, I guess it could have been trespassing or something like that for him doing it such a long time with nobody answering. But in that moment, I didn't think of it. Still, I was debating it. After literally probably like 20 minutes of knocking on my door, it finally stopped. After he didn't knock for a couple minutes, I went over and looked out of the window, and he was now gone. And also, I noticed no car nearby, so I didn't know where he had come from. I stayed up a while longer and checked out of all the windows and stuff and didn't see him. Soon after, I went to bed. Now, that night, I was awoken at 2 o'clock in the morning. When I woke up, the first thing I heard was someone knocking at my front door. The guy was back, and he was knocking at my door again. And he was knocking in the exact same way. He was just calmly knocking on it, waiting a bit, and then knocking again. I was so creeped out. But this knocking didn't last long. He was only there for about 5 minutes this time, and then stopped and left. I was pretty creeped out still, though. Thankfully, he did not come back that night, and I never saw him again. I don't live there anymore, but I still wonder what the story was there. I never saw him prior to that or after that. So was he a neighbor? I don't think so. Did he follow me home or watch me return home? Maybe, but I don't know. I still wonder what he would have said or what would have happened had I answered the door, but I'm also glad that I didn't. One night, I was home alone watching a movie on TV. I'd been flipping through the channels until I found something interesting, like I often do. I live by myself in an apartment, and it's a pretty average place for the most part. As it got to be late at night, I was starting to get tired. Out of nowhere, randomly, there was a knock on my apartment front door. At first, I thought that it was one of my neighbors complaining about the noise. The volume of the movie on my TV was pretty loud, to be honest. So I quickly turned it down and then got up from the couch and walked over to the front door. Before opening the door, I looked through the peephole. I saw a young woman standing there. She looked to be in her 20s, had dark hair and a few tattoos on her arms. I didn't recognize her, but then again, I didn't know most of my neighbors. Thinking she was still a neighbor, I opened the door. Before she said anything, I said, "Sorry, I didn't realize I had the volume so loud." In my mind, I was 100% sure that she was complaining about the noise because I had no idea what on earth else a neighbor would be at my door for. She looked confused for a moment and then said, "No, that's fine." Then she told me that she was in an awkward situation. She said her boyfriend had accidentally backed into my car in the parking lot. Her boyfriend was apparently over at the car and didn't want to leave the scene, so she came in to tell me. I parked my car in the same spot every day in the parking lot, and it was out there and our lot was sort of small. Things would get crowded with cars, so I was sort of annoyed by this, but was also glad that the woman was telling me about it and they didn't just drive away. I told her 1 second I would go and get my phone, and she said okay. I needed my phone for insurance stuff and to take pictures of the damage. I quickly went back into my apartment and my phone was still on the couch in the living room. When I got it, I was now at the back end of my apartment and near my balcony. There was a large window, and from there you could see most of the parking lot and sort of the area where I parked. I was curious, so I went over and looked out of the window. I saw the parking lot and it seemed completely quiet. When I looked to where my car was, I could just barely see it, but I could in fact see it, and it appeared to be just fine. There was nobody standing around it and no car right next to it or anything. I couldn't see any damage. Suddenly, this whole thing seemed really sketchy. I went back to the door and opened it again. The woman was still there. I asked her how much damage there was to the car. She said it was pretty bad and we better go to the car now. There definitely was not a lot of damage on my car. I told her that she must be mistaken. She mentioned my full name and asked if that was me. I said yes, and then she confirmed that yes, it was my car that had been hit. I was confused. I explained to her that I just saw my car out the window and it didn't look like there was any damage on it at all. She looked at me but did not say anything. Then the woman just turned and walked away without saying a word. She was quickly gone. I went back inside my apartment. Then I looked out the window again towards the parking lot. Things were really quiet there for a minute or two, but I continued watching. I saw the same woman as well as a man come into my view. Both of them walked into a random car which was not even close to mine, and then quickly drove away. I was really creeped out by the whole thing. I had never seen that woman before in my life prior to that night. I couldn't help but feel that she was trying to set me up. She was with a guy, and maybe they were going to try to rob me or something. I'm really glad that I didn't follow her. But how did she know which car was mine? Or how did she know my name? That part is something that I still don't know. I'm going to tell you the story of a really strange thing that happened a while back. This was 2 years ago, and I was living with a roommate named Mallory, who was one of my best friends. We're still good friends today, but no longer live together. So we lived in this 2-bedroom apartment on the first floor of the building. It was an average place. I liked the apartment because it had 2 bedrooms and a living room and kitchen in the middle. Mallory and I each had our own bedrooms as well as bathrooms which were connected to the bedrooms. Living in the apartment was fun. Sometimes the other friends in our friend group would come over and hang out. But one night Mallory was gone late as she had to work, and then told me that she was going to her parents' after for dinner. I remember that I had to work late that night, and I arrived back at the apartment at roughly 9 p.m. After getting back, Mallory was still gone, so I was there by myself. I changed and then sat down on the couch with some food and started watching TV. I wasn't sure exactly what time Mallory would be back. As I was sitting on the couch and watching TV, I started to feel relaxed, but that feeling quickly went away. Out of nowhere, the TV that I was watching shut off. It was really strange. The power did not go out because the other lights remained on. I grabbed the remote and then turned the TV back on, but within probably 5 seconds, it shut off again. I knew that I did not touch the remote and I didn't know what was going on, so I got up and walked over to the TV. I'm not sure what I was looking for, if maybe a cord was becoming unplugged from the wall or something like that. It was really strange, and now that the TV was off, the apartment was completely quiet. As I was standing, I was closer to our back window. This looked out to behind the apartment complex, which had a walking path, and behind that was trees and people's backyards in a nearby neighborhood. The blinds were mostly closed, but standing by them you could sort of see between them. At a distance, it looked just dark outside, but now that I was close up, I suddenly saw a movement out of the corner of my eye. It was coming from outside, and I looked over and saw someone or something moving farther down. I went over to the window and moved some of the blinds and looked out. I was just on time to see a man running away really close to the apartment. I only saw his back as he was illuminated by other people's back lights being on. He was wearing a sweatshirt and hood which covered his head from the backside. He jogged away and was quickly out of sight. The man had been so close to my apartment, and there was no way that he had just been out walking on the trail. That was about 50 feet away. For some reason, he was deliberately right behind my apartment. I stayed there watching for a while, and he did not return. After that, I turned the TV back on, and it did not turn right back off. In fact, it didn't turn off by itself at all anymore. I sat on the couch and continued to watch TV, wondering if it would turn back off, but it never did. About 30 minutes later, Mallory got back home. I told her about the strange occurrences. We concluded that the man that ran away was most likely right outside of our window, and he must have had a remote and turned the TV off for some reason. With Roku TVs, which we had, the remotes tend to work with all the other televisions, so that's very possible. But the question that I have is why? Was it just a funny prank? I found it to be really creepy, especially that hour at night, and I'm really glad that it never happened again after that. One time back in the 1990s when I was in high school, I was left home alone. Me being home by myself was something that very rarely happened because I have a large family. Living in the house was my parents, my older brother and sister, me, and then my 2 younger sisters as well. So with all those people, the chances were that somebody would be home pretty much all the time. Now, I don't remember where everyone had to go on this particular night, but it just so happened that everyone had places to go except for me. So for a few hours that night, I would have the house to myself. I was not nervous at all because I wasn't a little kid, I was in high school, but it still felt really odd just because I was not used to it. I remembered that the house felt very quiet. It was dark outside, and our neighborhood was pretty typical. A good amount of other houses on the street, but things were mostly pretty quiet. At one point, maybe an hour or two into being home by myself, I went downstairs from my room to go to the kitchen. This was on the main floor and towards the back of the house. There I was getting something to drink when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. Much of the lights in the house were off, so I could see out the back windows better. We had a door that led out to the back patio, and I saw someone outside approaching it. I could tell right away though that it was not my parents and none of my siblings. It looked like some random guy. He didn't seem to notice me because I was entering the kitchen from an angle that was not really in his line of vision. Plus, it was mostly dark in the house. It was like right when I came around the corner to enter the kitchen, I saw him. I stopped and froze where I was. The man continued to approach the back door. I was now in the kitchen and near this door that led down to the basement. I then looked back over at the door where the man was headed and realized that it was unlocked. This gave me a terrible feeling of panic. In that split second, I did what was kind of a reaction to that, and I quickly opened up the basement door, which I was very close to. It was already slightly open, and I went inside and then shut the door behind me. Just when I did, I heard the back door to the house opening. I then quickly ran down the stairs. Our basement was finished, but there wasn't much down there. The stairs had carpet, which I'm glad for because it made my footsteps very quiet. I then went into kind of the main basement area where we had a couch and an old TV. We had some blankets on the floor next to the couch, and I literally hid under them. At first, when I got down there, I heard footsteps upstairs of the man walking. I could not tell where he was going though. I just hoped that he wouldn't go down into the basement where I was. I wanted to call my parents or the police, but could not. I didn't have a cell phone back then, and we did not have a home phone in the basement, only upstairs. I hid under the blankets for the longest time, and I didn't hear or see anything as I was covered. After I'm not even sure how long, I finally got up the courage to get up. I emerged and did not hear anything. The man had definitely not come down to the basement. After listening and not hearing anything at all for a while, I carefully made my way back up the stairs. When I got up to the top, I slowly and quietly opened the door to the kitchen from the basement. I looked around and saw nothing. There was a phone in the kitchen though, so I just needed to get it. After I got the phone, I then brought it back down to the basement. In that time, I still heard and saw nothing. I was hoping that the man had left. I called the police from the basement and told them that a man had entered our house, and I gave them the address. I didn't know if the guy was still there or not, but I knew that I should call to be safe. So I waited down in the basement until the cops got there, and I figured that the man was probably long gone by now. When the police arrived, I went upstairs and let them into the house. Then the police searched the entire place. To my surprise, they found the man hiding upstairs in my bedroom of all places. I was shocked. My parents got home not long after, as well as some of my siblings. I don't remember a whole lot after that, but it was certainly a crazy experience. I do not know exactly why the man chose our house, or if there was a reason he went to my room. The back door had been left unlocked with so many of us living there and coming and going, but after that, everyone always made sure to lock it. This happened many years ago. I was much younger and a single man living on my own. I was out with a friend one night watching the game at a bar. I remember that he had to leave early for whatever reason, so I stayed there by myself because I wanted to see the end of the game. I was sitting at the bar, and towards the end of it, I noticed a woman sitting a few seats down. The bar had not really been that busy. I didn't notice when exactly she got there, but I don't think she was there for the whole game. There were other people around. The bar wasn't dead, but it was not super busy either. The woman seemed to be there by herself, and she was just sitting at the bar drinking something. I found her to be attractive, so I was actually thinking of striking up a conversation with her, but she spoke to me first. She looked over and asked if I had bet money on the game. Admittedly, I had bet the over on the score, and I told her that. We got to talking a little bit, maybe like 20 minutes, and before I knew it, the game was over. I thought that it was a good conversation, and shortly after the game, the woman said that she was going to leave. I decided to ask her for her number, and when I did, without hesitation, she said that I could have it. She told me the number, and then I put it in my phone, and she left. I was feeling good about how things had gone. When I talked to her, I was funny, she was laughing, I asked her questions, and she had asked me questions. It seemed like a really good conversation in my opinion. I was excited to hopefully see her again, and text with her. The next day, I did something out of character. I was feeling bold, so I decided to call her instead of just text. The way our conversation had gone, I figured that she would not mind. So I called her number sometime in the late morning. She picked up, and I heard nothing on the other end. So I spoke. I said, "Hello," and I was literally starting to say something else when the phone call just ended. It was like she had hung up. My heart sank. Then, moments later, I got a text. It said, "Who are you?" I replied with my name and said, "We met last night, remember?" In my mind, there was still a sliver of hope in this moment, and I was hanging on to it, even if that sounds pathetic. She texted back saying, "Huh?" Again, my heart sank. I thought to myself, how would she not remember me? I had spoken to her for a long time, and I knew she wasn't drunk. Sure, both of us had had drinks, but I only had 2 the whole night, and I can confirm that she did not even seem drunk at all. So I decided to try to clear things up by calling her again. I felt that I could explain the situation better over speaking and not texting, so I dialed her back. This time she picked up again, except it was not the girl that I had met at the bar. It was some random guy, and he sounded angry. Obviously I couldn't see the guy, but he sounded large and had a sort of deep and booming voice. Right away he was angry. I thought for a moment maybe he was the woman's husband or boyfriend. He asked who I was and why I kept bothering him, and asked if I was trying to prank him. He said all this without letting me speak. When he was finally done yelling at me, I told him that I had met a girl at a bar last night and she gave me this number. He started yelling at me again, saying that that was the most unbelievable thing he ever heard and that he will not be harassed and he ought to call the cops on me. Then he said, matter of fact, I should come down and find you and beat you myself. I didn't know why this guy was so angry. I asked him if he knew the woman, and he said no, once more going on and on an angry rant. This guy was one of the angriest people I've ever spoken to. So what? I called the wrong number. Is that like the crime of the century? I told him I was sorry and that I had the wrong number, and I said I really didn't mean to bother him. He started ranting again, saying I had better leave him alone now. I hung up at that point, cutting him off from another one of his rants. I double-checked the number that I dialed with the number the girl gave me. It was the same. So either she intentionally gave me the wrong number or I wrote it down wrong. Part of me wanted to believe that I just wrote it down wrong, but deep down, I knew the truth. She had given me the wrong number, but it didn't end there. The guy who I called by accident then started texting me. He started spamming me with threatening messages. He was saying how I harassed him and how he was going to find me and hunt me down and get me. After like the 10th text in the span of 2 or 3 minutes, I blocked him. And after that, I didn't get any more of those texts. I went back to the bar a few times over the next several months. I didn't want to see the woman again, but if I did, I was planning to talk to her about giving me the wrong number. However, I never saw her again. I'm still kind of mad about it, but it happens, I guess. I was hanging out in my living room just watching TV in my apartment one night. It was a relaxing evening until my phone rang. When I looked, I saw that it was a number I didn't recognize, so I didn't answer. A short time later, I got a notification that I had a new voicemail. I thought that it was odd how somebody that I didn't know had just called me and left a voicemail. I figured it was some kind of a scam, but I decided to play the message. So I went on my phone and listened to it. A person with a kind of weird voice said, "Marcus, congratulations, call me back." My name is not Marcus. I figured that this person had the wrong number. I had no idea why somebody would be congratulating me or calling me Marcus. I texted the number saying, "I am not Marcus, I think you have the wrong number." Literally right after this, they called me back. I did not like the fact that they had called me instead of texting me, but I decided to answer to try to clear the air. As soon as I said hello, the man with the weird voice said, "Hi Marcus." The way that the guy spoke was just strange. It was not just the way his voice sounded, but also his tone and overall everything. I stopped him and said, "I'm not Marcus, you have the wrong number." The person insisted that I was. He said, "Marcus, congratulations." I was so confused that I was speechless. I literally said nothing. The guy then said, "Congratulations, Marcus," and then he hung up. At that point, I thought that it had to be now a prank. Somebody was pulling a joke on me. Why this was a joke, I had no idea. Who's Marcus? I don't know. I also didn't know who would be doing this because I didn't recognize the voice at all. I also have all my friends' numbers saved. It just didn't sound like a voice changer though, or one of those AI voices. There just seemed to be too much emotion in it. It sounded human. A short time later, they called again, which I let go to voicemail. The person left a voicemail once more, and when I listened to it, I only got more confused. The person calling said, "I'm calling you to say that you are Marcus, and I don't know why you keep denying it. Call me back when you have a chance, and congratulations." This was so weird. I didn't know what was going on. I did not call the person back. I didn't respond by text either. I really didn't know what to do. A few days went by, and I had no more calls or texts from this person. Then I came home to my apartment one evening to find an envelope at my front door. I picked it up, went inside, and then opened it. There was a letter that said at the start of it, "Congratulations, Marcus." The letter went on to say a whole bunch of nothing. It was typed out with a basic font. There was a lot of big words that sounded really complicated, but in my mind it pretty much added up to a whole lot of nothing. In the end though, I noticed that it said I had to pay them $10,000. I had no idea why. I ripped up the letter and threw it away. Since then, I have not received any more letters or calls or anything. But the fact that this person went to my apartment and knows where I live really creeps me out. I'm hoping that it was just a prank put on by a friend. But I just don't know who would do that or why. It just seems so random. This happened many years ago in the 1990s. I was in high school at the time and lived with my parents and older sister at home. I was constantly using my phone to talk to my friends on almost a daily basis. This was before social media obviously, and was before texting was really that popular. Every time I would call my friends, I would dial the entire number. There was speed dial and stuff like that, but I just didn't really use it. I had all my friends' numbers memorized and I could dial really fast. So on this particular night, I was at home by myself. My parents were gone somewhere, I don't remember where, and so was my sister. I was going to call my friend Jacqueline and ask if she wanted to come over and hang out because I was bored. We would hang out at each other's places all the time. I think it must have been a Friday night, because normally I wouldn't have called people to hang out that late. And also, I don't think my parents and sister would have been out late on a weeknight. Anyways, after I dialed Jacqueline's number, I remember that she picked up. As soon as she did, I just started talking. We were such good friends and called each other so much that we really didn't say, "Hello, who's there?" We had caller ID as well, so we would know when each other was calling. As soon as I heard her pick up, I just said, "Hey, I'm bored, my parents and sister are gone, so I'm just home by myself. What are you doing? Do you want to come over?" After I said this, there was just silence on the other end. I said, "Hello?" Then the phone call ended as the other line hung up. I was confused. Why would my best friend Jacqueline hang up on me, and why wouldn't she say anything? So I dialed her again to call her back. I was thinking that it had to be a mistake and we just randomly got disconnected or something. This time when I called her, she picked up again. Except this time she said, "What's up?" I asked her if she had just hung up on me. She said no. I told her how I had just called her, and she said that she did not get any calls from me until just now. I was confused for a moment, until I realized that I must have dialed the wrong number before. Perhaps I got one of the digits wrong, and someone else had picked up. This was kind of awkward, because I had actually talked to them. Why would they not say anything, though? Either way, it was not too big of a deal, but just slightly embarrassing. So I went on to ask Jacqueline if she wanted to come over, but she said she could not because she was about to watch a movie with her parents. So we talked for maybe a minute longer and then hung up. After that, I just decided to go to the living room and see what was on TV or something like that. So around 30 minutes later probably, as I was there on the couch in the living room, I heard a knock on the front door. This was really strange because it was nighttime. All the windows were covered, so I had no idea who would be there. I was instantly creeped out. After a pause of maybe 30 seconds, they knocked again. This time I went over to a front window and very carefully looked out of it. It was dark outside, but I could tell that a man was standing there. However, I could not see any details about him. He then tried to open the door, which thankfully was locked. I was now freaking out. Some random guy was trying to break in, it seemed. He then turned and walked away. I only saw his backside as he made his way to the street. I just remember that he was wearing a jacket, so I couldn't really tell what he looked like at all. The whole thing really freaked me out, but I was glad that he was now gone. It wasn't until a few minutes later that I wondered if he was the person that I accidentally called. I mean, I had mentioned that I was home alone, and I had also dialed a number in the same area code, so he would be local. But how he got my exact address, I'm not sure. It could also just be a crazy coincidence, but I don't think it was. After that, he never came back. But I often remember that and wonder if it was the same guy, and if so, how he knew where I lived exactly. I'm just glad that he never returned. I live by myself in a sort of small house currently that I rent. I've lived here for a couple of years. About 6 months ago was the scariest thing that's happened since I've been here. My neighborhood is pretty typical. There are a lot of other houses on the street. It's in a place where there are a lot of neighbors, but the street is typically pretty quiet, especially at night. I haven't seen many crazy things around the neighborhood at all. Rarely is there ever police activity or anything sketchy seeming going on. So one night, I was by myself at home. I was in my living room hanging out and had been for a while. My windows in the living room look out to the front yard and also to the street. So the windows were mostly covered by the shades, but not entirely. I had like a couple of feet maybe on one end. I got up for whatever reason, maybe to get something to drink or to use the restroom, I don't remember. But as I passed by the uncovered spot of the window, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. When I looked, it appeared as though a man was standing a few feet into my front yard. He was slowly walking, and I also noticed that he was wearing this really creepy-looking mask. It was a latex mask, the kind that are realistic and go entirely over your head. But this one I could tell was a mask right away, but it was still pretty crazy. I'm not sure who the mask was supposed to be of, or if it was just like a generic man or something. But it was a male's face, and it was definitely a scary sight to see out the window. When I saw him, he kind of kept walking forward, and then I'm not sure if he noticed me or what, because after that he turned and walked off into the street. He had looked over in my general direction, but not right at me, and I obviously couldn't tell exactly where he was looking. After he walked off, he disappeared down the street, and then I closed the shades entirely. I hoped that this guy would not return. I checked out the windows again before going to bed, and things were fine. To be honest, I really didn't know what that was all about, but I figured that he was just passing by. Maybe he was trying to pull a prank on someone else. I really don't know. He had only gone like 10 feet into my yard at most, and never really got that close to my house or anything. But literally right before I was about to go to sleep that night, I went on my phone. I saw that I had a new follow request on Instagram. When I looked to see who it was, the profile name was Jonathan Jones, which is obviously a fake name, but the profile picture was of a guy wearing that exact same mask. I looked at the account, following 0 people and 0 followers, 0 posts as well. It had just been made, and this was the same guy who was in my yard. Something was really fishy here. I declined his follow request and looked out the windows one more time. They were good. Then I went to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I saw that he had requested to follow me again. This time, out of curiosity, I messaged him. I said something like, "Who are you?" He did not respond though. And then I went on with my day. I didn't accept or decline the request at that point. That night, I went back on to look. He had still not answered me, but had seen the message, and he withdrew his follow request. I was now very confused, but I was also really creeped out. So much so that one of my best friends came over to stay the night on my couch so that I wouldn't be alone. We looked out the windows every so often. Then, at one point, maybe 10 o'clock at night, my friend yelled that she saw him. I got up and ran over to the window. It was covered, but she was carefully looking out of the bottom corner of it, pulling back the blinds. I looked too, and saw the same man casually walking down the street. He got to my house and looked over, and we both ducked down. Moments later, we looked again. The man walked up the driveway and seemed to notice my friend's car there. He stopped and was just looking at it for like 10 seconds straight. Then he turned and looked to the window. I'm sure that he saw us. We both ducked down again really fast. I was terrified. When we looked again though, he was walking off and disappearing down the street. We thought about calling the cops, but did not. He did not return again that night, at least not that we're aware of. And after that, I'm not aware of him ever coming back. He never requested to follow me again, and he never messaged me on Instagram or anything after. I still don't know who he was. He clearly knew who I was though. It's something that really creeps me out when I look back on it.